If you follow me and my work, you probably know that I create ball-jointed porcelain dolls. But did you know that to make a porcelain doll, you need to sculpt one from clay first? I'm Adele, a professional doll artist, and today I will walk you through the process of sculpting a ball-jointed doll from air-dry clay. If you're interested in creating one for yourself, check out my ball-jointed doll sculpting masterclass or Patreon tutorials where I talk in depth about doll making and show you every step of the process. And now, let's get on with the video. This doll you see now is sculpted from air-dried clay. Since the porcelain is a liquid, I need to make molds first, but to make molds, you need a prototype. That's why I sculpt all my dolls from air-dry clay first, and only then they can become the porcelain beauties you know as Nymphai dolls. To sculpt this doll, I use my favorite La Doll premix clay. It's easy to work with and sturdy enough to withhold the molding process. The first step is to gather your materials and draw a blueprint for your doll. If you can't find the premix clay, La Doll clay in a pink package is also great. I start by sculpting the rough shapes of all the parts for the doll's body. To keep the body hollow, I usually use styrofoam and remove it later. The first few layers of clay are not meant to be pretty. You just want to figure out proportions of your doll and create a good base for further sculpting. To remove the styrofoam, I cut the pieces in half and glue them back together using PVA glue. This way you'll be able to insert the elastic later when assembling the doll. Now the fun sculpting and detailing begins. I keep my blueprint close so I could check on proportions as much as I need to. It's also helpful to have reference pictures of the human body or sketches of the doll you want to make. With air-dry clay, I sculpt in layers, meaning I wait for one layer to dry before adding more clay. I do this because it's easier to control the clay and you won't mess the previously sculpted details in the process. I find air-dry clay very forgiving because you can change your sculpture as many times as you want. You can cut off the pieces, sand or carve the clay when it's dry, or keep adding the clay to get things right. The hardest part of sculpting ball-jointed dolls is obviously joints, so I want to talk more about them as well. I sculpt my own balls from clay, so here I'll show you my method. Create a rough ball from clay. Using a circle template, make sure it's bigger than the ball you need for the joints. Leave the clay to dry fully. Overnight is best. The next day, when the clay is completely dry, submerge the clay balls in water. Leave them for a few minutes so only the surface is soft again. Prepare your circle template and push the ball through the bigger hole. You don't want to use force, just a little push. The circle template should shave off the soft outer layer of clay, keeping the clay perfectly round. Continue this process until you have a completely round ball. It will take a few times of submerging the clay back in the water. Keep pushing the ball through a little bit smaller holes to make sure there are no rough edges left. You will see that the ball became much smaller, but it's perfectly round and can be used for sculpting joints. Just don't forget to sand it before that. To sculpt the knee joint, I connect two balls and start adding the clay at the front of the knee. You want to constantly check with other doll parts on how the joint fits, so every doll will be different and unique in that way. Sculpting the joints is definitely the hardest part for me because you need a little bit of mathematical mind to understand how it will move and connect with other parts. You need to be very precise so the doll would be able to hold the poses and move in the way you want. After sanding and a few finishing touches, I can finally say that I'm almost done with this joint, even though more corrections will come after test stringing the doll. But for now, I'm ready to move on to different parts of the doll. My favorite part of sculpting any doll is definitely the head, hands, and feet. I love sculpting tiny details and create unique characters with them. The lines you see on the head really helps with symmetry while sculpting, so I keep redrawing them throughout the whole process. It takes a lot of layers to sculpt the face. I like to use carving techniques and even the small brushes to help me achieve the sculpture I want. With the drying time, it might take a week to finish sculpting the head. The hands can be quite a difficult part to sculpt, but I like it nonetheless. I feel that hands can convey a lot of information about the character, and I love how it looks in photos. So I spend a lot of time perfecting them. Usually I sculpt every finger one by one and then connect them with more clay to form a hand. At first it looks a little bit rough, but sanding and carving really brings out the details. Before carving the details with a precision knife, I like to wet the surface to make the clay more pliable. Then it's really easy to achieve any details you want. I like to carve the skin creases, nails, lines, and everything else to make the hands look more realistic. When I'm happy with the result, I coat everything with grey primer to protect the clay and hide any tiny imperfections. Also, don't forget to play with your doll throughout the whole sculpting process. The last bit of sculpting left to do is to sculpt feet. As with hands, I love to make all the details visible. Lots of carving is involved when sculpting the feet too. At first, I sculpt the rough shape of the foot, and when the clay has dried completely, I start carving with a precision knife. When it comes to finer details, I wet the surface of the clay and gently carve the toes. This process takes a little bit of patience, but I always get better results with carving rather than just sculpting. When all the parts are complete, it's time to test your doll. For this, I use double elastic string and connect all the pieces. We want to see what corrections are needed and how the doll poses before the final stringing. Now, I don't really worry that the knots of the elastic are visible and just secure them with metal or wooden bars. I try to critically look at my doll to see all the small changes I want to make. My first few tests are to see how the joints are moving and holding the poses. Sometimes you need to adjust the size of the joint or even resculpt them to create a beautifully moving doll. So play with your doll a little and inspect every piece from all sides. After all the hard work, to see your doll coming together is incredibly rewarding. I hope this video inspires you to sculpt your own doll. Even though this process is long and pretty difficult, there's nothing more fun than seeing your own ball-jointed doll making all those poses. And I wanted to show you that behind every porcelain doll, there is one sculpted from clay. Also, before you go, check out my doll sculpting masterclass that will guide you through the whole process. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time.